Hi guys, my name's Dav and welcome to D&DGaming. If this is your first time visiting our channel, we provide honest and in-depth game reviews on a wide range of PC games and review them from the perspective of two experienced gamers. We highly recommend you click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our up and coming game reviews. If you find you like this review, remember to give it a thumbs up by hitting that like button. With that said, in for review this time around is Star Wars Squadrons. Reviewing the game with me is my brother Dale.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Star Wars Squadrons is a space combat game set in the Star Wars universe, developed by Motive Studios and published by EA. It was released for Microsoft Windows, Xbox One and PlayStation 4 in October 2020 and for Xbox Series X and S in December 2020. The game features both multiplayer game modes and a single player campaign. Set after the return of the Jedi, the campaign alternates between the New Republic's Vanguard Squadron and the Galactic Empire's Titan Squadron, both of which become involved with the Republic's Project Starhawk. Vanguard Squadron wants to ensure its completion, while Titan Squadron attempts to destroy it. So Dad, what were your first impressions of this?
My first impressions from screenshots and trailer footage was a space combat starfighter battle game set in the Star Wars universe, I guess. I have to say I haven't really played many starfighter space dogfight type games. They're not generally my sort of thing, but it was quite refreshing to play one for a change.
Yeah, in terms of first impressions for me, it just looked like a space simulator game set in the Star Wars universe. It's been a while since I played something like this, and I assumed it was going to be a fairly linear space combat sim rather than an open world kind of sim game, and I was about right on that. So what are your general thoughts following your playthrough?
Generally, it wasn't a bad game and I enjoyed it in parts, but there are some issues which I'll talk about shortly, and I do think the game developers missed some tricks with this one. I will say, however, if you're looking for a realistic simulation game, then you're probably best looking past this one. We'll explain more shortly.
Yeah, it is a very arcadey feeling game. I found there was very little depth in the ship's systems. It's only not a true simulator type game by any stretch of the imagination, but then again, I don't think it claims to be, so I certainly didn't expect like deep levels of customization of the ships. But yeah, you got to go into this one realizing it's arcadey and not a true simulator. So what did you think in terms of graphic options?
I thought there was a nice array of graphic options to tweak it and get it running how you want on your PC.
Yeah, likewise, a decent range of graphic options, although it would have been nice to have ray tracing, given I've got an NVIDIA card, and I think that could have looked really nice in this game.
So in terms of graphics and graphic performance, we'll put our PC specs up on screen as usual, but the game ran beautifully on my PC with everything on highest possible settings, which was mostly ultra, I think. No notable graphic issues or frame drops, and it ran really slick. The graphic options themselves are really nice. The colors, lighting, shadows, etc. all really nicely balanced, and that provides really nice looking environments, both when on a large capital ship and out in space in the starfighters. The character animations are really good, looked really authentic. The NPCs move really smoothly, are really expressive in their facial movements, and really give over a genuine Star Wars feel to their characters.
I also ran everything on mostly ultra, and it did run well for the most part. Seems well optimized, although I did have some slight stuttering in the larger battles when there was a lot going on the screen. I guess that also could have been because I was recording it, which also, hogs the system to some extent. But yeah, again, in these sort of games, you expect a little bit of lag where there's so many explosions and there's so much going on the screen. But yeah, it really ran well for the most part. Graphics themselves look great. I mean, I was really impressed in places. Some of the planetary systems in particular, the capital ships, when you're out in one of the starfighters and you can go right down, especially the star destroyers in particular, I found you could really go down and see almost like every gun on the ship, and I was really impressed by that. The facial animations on the NPCs looked good and very lifelike for some of the characters. So as I mentioned, in particular, some of the planetary systems were amazing, and I was really impressed by some of the details. There's a level where you have to navigate through a storm, and it looked really nice and atmospheric. I was really impressed.
So in terms of player controls, for me, this is where the game really did begin to fall down. The game is first person only, but when on the capital ships, you can't move around freely. You can only look around and find that icons appear above people's heads that you can interact with. But when you do, the screen goes blank and you reappear next to the person and they begin talking to you. I consider this a really big issue with the game. I'm not a big Star Wars fan, but I do like the film franchise. However, for example, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. If I'm playing a Lord of the Rings game, I want to engross myself and get lost in that game by moving around and exploring as if you're in the film itself, not being stuck on the spot, just clicking a mouse button to interact with not even a handful of NPCs that are on the screen. I think this is quite poor, and if I was a Star Wars fan and was really looking forward to playing this and I found I was faced with that, I'd be pretty pissed off. I get that the game is focused on the starfighters and battles, but some more focus on the capital ship environments to at least be able to move around would have been nice. For example, being able to move around and view your starfighter from all angles, as basic as that is, would have created a more immersive environment. So in terms of controls, when on foot in the capital ship, it's a simple left mouse click to move using the icons above the characters' heads, as already mentioned. The controls on the starfighters are quite good, however, and it works quite well with a combination of the mouse and keyboard on PC. When in the starfighter, you use WASD to move the fighter and the mouse to pitch yaw and roll. Then there are keyboard controls for weapons, squadron commands, etc., and these vary depending on the starfighter and its weaponry and functions. Controller joystick support is available, however we didn't test this as part of the review, so we can't comment on the controls in that respect.
Yeah, the controls were about as I expected, although I did find the ships didn't have much of a feel to them, which I guess is because the flight models are quite basic. I also couldn't tell much difference between the ships, despite them ranging from light attack TIE fighters to heavy bombers that were intended to go against capital ships. There really didn't seem to be enough of a difference in the feel of them. I used the mouse and keyboard, and the controls were about as expected, easy enough to grasp, and using the mouse to aim likely makes things that bit easier than if you're trying to use a controller or a joystick. I did plan to dig out my old Cytec X45, which is a proper hands-on throttle and stick, but I didn't get around to it in the end. To be honest, the idea of using the joystick to aim on this one didn't seem to appeal in any way, given how extremely fast-paced it is at times. Trying to get a good aim can be tough. This does depend on the ship itself and a particular battle, but I found quite often they were flying past and you're just quickly turning, firing, turning again, and that would be quite tough on a HOTAS, I think.
So in terms of game story mode, the story is picked up following the destruction of Alderaan, where Darth Vader orders all Imperial forces to hunt down any refugees who escape the planet's destruction. Captain Lyndon Javes of the Imperial Navy is tasked with Commodore Ray Sloan to lead Helix Squadron in finding and eliminating a convoy of refugees at 4-Star Haven. Despite locating the convoy, Javes turns on his wingmen and disables their ships to protect the refugees. The convoy sends a distress signal to the Rebel Alliance, who dispatch Echo Squadron to assist in the convoy's escape. After the battle, Javes defects to the Alliance. 4 years later, after the Alliance's victory in the Battle of Endor, the newly promoted Commander Javes assumes command of the New Republic cruiser Temperance and its elite fighters Vanguard Squadron. Assigned to the secret project known as Starhawk, the squadron undertakes missions to ensure Project Starhawk's completion. Meanwhile, Imperial Captain Teresa Carril, Javes' former protege and wingman, is eager to take vengeance on him for his betrayal and is assigned to put an end to Project Starhawk before its completion. She assigns her own elite fighters, Titan Squadron, to hinder the New Republic's progress to complete the Starhawk. So in the game you play as two pilots, one for the Empire and one for the Rebellion, and the story mode alternates between the two. When you start the game for the first time, you get to customise your two characters. I must say, I can't believe the game actually says the word customise. There's barely any customization options available. You can then select your pilot experience, standard or instruments only. Standard is with all the HUD info and help, etc. Instruments only mode removes most of the HUD items and means that you're more reliant on onboard instruments. You can also select your difficulty, one of 4 to choose from. The easiest story mode, followed by pilot, veteran, and then top difficulty is ace mode.
Friends call me Ace. I've come from another dimension. What a guy.
Following an intro cutscene, you then begin the first mission, which is kind of a training mission in itself, teaching you the basic controls for the starfighter. Once the first mission is complete, you have access to the main menu options and can continue the story mode.
In terms of the game's mechanics, you fly various starfighters across the missions depending on if the missions are for the Empire or the Rebel Alliance. You get the mission briefing in the briefing room on the capital ship and then head out to the hangar. Some missions that you choose between multiple starfighters when you start, others you will set a particular one at the start of the mission. You select prepare for launch above the starfighter and the game goes into a cutscene and launches.
5 hours later.
Once out from the capital ship, you then typically follow orders to attack, defend, etc. And then the game usually automatically sends you back to the capital ship. Once back on the capital ship, you start back in the hangar where you talk to the NPCs, inspect things, or go to the briefing room for the next mission brief. In terms of the other game modes, there's challenge mode. This mode has daily challenges you can complete to gain experience and glory, which can be spent on unlockable cosmetic content. There's quick battle mode, which allows you to play online and searches for battles for you to get involved in. And then there's multiplayer modes. There are 2 multiplayer modes in this: Dogfight, which is a team deathmatch mode that supports up to 10 players, and Fleet Battles, in which 2 teams of 5 players compete to destroy each other's capital ships.
So in terms of UI, the UI on the capital ships is non-existent, other than a few icons that pop up to show you NPCs you can interact with, so this really can't be critiqued much. The UI instrument panel for the starfighters is more advanced and varies dependent on the fighter you're flying. Typical icons on the starfighters instruments panel include ship damage, shield level, repair meter, and weapon and ammo loadouts. There is also a sonar scope for help with navigation, although to be fair, I found I barely even looked at it. The HUD includes your current objective, a crosshair for weapon aiming, and an icon that moves around for locking onto targets, and a communication pop-up for when communicating with other pilots in your squadron.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that, although, as briefly mentioned by Dav earlier, the HUD can also be changed in the menu to a mode where you rely more on the ship's actual instrument and have a less cluttered AI, but I actually just stuck with the default mode in the end.
So in terms of sound and music, the voice acting is actually quite good. Nothing amazing, but it felt quite immersive and authentic.
I'd rather be defending the Starhawk, but I promise that reactivating the broadcast hub is the best thing you can do to ensure the project's survival. Good luck. I know you won't let me down.
Starfighter weapon sounds were great. They sounded like they were straight out of a Star Wars movie, and may well have been, I guess.
Annihilate the target.
Other general Starfighter cabin sounds, damage sounds, etc. are all really good. Nothing I noticed was out of place in any way. The music was bang on, Star Wars all over.
I agree, the music was very fitting and sounded just like the movies. Voice acting was good all round. I did find that some of the alien type species for the New Republic were very well voiced, given how hard it is to recreate the voices for these alien type species.
I used to be in what you might call acquisitions, you know, hunting down trophies, antiques, anything collectors wanted. Until I got that pesky death mark, of course.
Ship sounds were all good, with proper sounding weapons and all sorts of warnings going off when you get damaged and have missiles locked onto you. So did you find any bugs or glitches?
No, I didn't have any bugs or glitches at all, actually. The game was perfect in that respect. It ran really well.
I did have a major crash where the game just locked up halfway through a mission. No idea why. Had to just alt tab out, restart the whole thing, which was a little frustrating because I had to go right back to the start of that mission. But that did only occur once. As I touched on earlier, I did have a lot of lagging when there was a lot going on the screen, even though my FPS was very high. As shown in the specs earlier, I have a 144 Hz monitor, and I could see that it was running at 144 frames per second. So I was struggling to see, why this was. As they could have been because I was recording as well. That takes up a certain amount of system resources, but it wasn't so bad that I'll mark it down too much for it, because when there's a lot going on screen, it's kind of expected, really.
So to sum up, things I liked about the game: really authentic Star Wars feel to the game. If you're a fan, you'll probably really like it just for that, to be honest. The graphics are awesome, and the cutscenes are particularly well done, very movie-like, and it felt like you were watching a Star Wars movie when watching the cutscenes at times. The story was quite gripping, and the intertwined Empire and Rebel storylines were planned out and executed very well within the game. There were just the right number of missions. Any less and the game would have been over too quickly, and any more it would have become a drag to get through them.
For me, one of the main positives was the graphics. They just looked really nice, and some of the battles, the amount of ships and the explosions looked really impressive. All the huge capital ships, they're all flying in at warp speed, and the planet systems, really nice detail, and that was really such a positive for me with this one. I thought the range of different flyable ships was good. Although I said there wasn't much variation in the feel of them, their actual function was vastly different, and you had to really pick the right ship for the mission sometimes, as they varied from everything from the lighter kind of TIE fighters right up to the heavy bombers, and I thought they got a good range overall. The Imperial Star Destroyers and the other capital ships were just awesome to see, and you fly up close often when you return from the missions, and yeah, it was really nice seeing it pan out, and really did just look like a movie.
So in terms of things I didn't like about the game, biggest one for me is the fact that you couldn't move around and explore on the capital ships, even just to look over your starfighter, as mentioned earlier. It's a real shame, and just moving around is something that's so easy to implement. Felt like it was going backwards in its game development here. The inspect option when on the capital ship was just pointless. All you could do was look around and you're locked in place with no interaction at all. It's very dumbed down, and I can't see a reason why they bothered adding it in. Other than the very first intro mission when starting the game.
Pilot, boot up your cockpit systems.
Yes.
All systems up and running. Pre-flight complete. Let's get a clean launch. Lock onto my fighter. Forward sensor online and tracking. Now, throttle up and deploy out of the hangar.
Every other mission, you don't get to launch your starfighter. It does it in a cutscene. I mean, what the fuck? Seriously. I think this could have been better created as more of a simulation game with better starfighter interaction. It felt far too dumbed down in its controls and limited interaction. A game for the console masses, where it could have been a really cool niche simulation game for Star Wars fans. And this is what I meant earlier: if you're looking for a Star Wars themed simulation game, then don't bother. Although I like the intertwined stories of the Empire and Rebel alliances, they could have put more choices in the game as to how the missions played out. There were only a handful of optional parts to the missions. It's quite a rinse and repeat game in story mode. Each mission is not really that different from each other. Go here, attack this, defend this, come back. An option to take a starfighter out for a spin between missions or go to do side missions or something like that would have been really cool.
I do feel this game was probably mostly created for the multiplayer aspect, and then the story mode was just put on at the last minute to appeal to more people. In many ways, it does feel a bit of an afterthought. In particular, as Dav mentioned, one of my main gripes is the fact that when you're in the hangars on the main ships, you can't move around freely and you're effectively locked in position. I really found this quite hard to believe, given that surely it couldn't have been that hard. It wasn't a huge area, the hangar itself or the briefing room. And I was just amazed that you just literally click on a button on the wall to go through the door and you just appear on the other side. It was really quite poor in that sense. There was a limited flight model with this. It didn't really have any feel to the ship. Distinguishing between the flight models was, well, you barely could between the different ships. Obviously, it is a space game, but it just felt very floaty at times, and you almost felt like detached from the actual ship itself, and you're just floating around in space. I'd say one of the main ways to sum up this game for me is that it was just very shallow. There was a lot that was done just almost like as an afterthought. Just seemed like it was perhaps even like rushed out, maybe to coincide with a particular promotion at the time. One frustration I had was that at times the resupply takes far too long, so you end up flying around wasting time waiting to be resupplied with missiles and your health, etc. And this is vital because there's times where you run out of missiles and you don't have many in the first place. And yeah, you just have to basically kill time until you can be resupplied, which sometimes takes I found takes a minute or more, which was really frustrating. As I just touched on, I found there wasn't enough missiles per ship. Some of them there was 3 to 5 of your main missiles, And sometimes you needed those to damage the capital ship systems and subsystems, and you'd do a run, 3 to 5 missiles, and then hang around for a minute waiting to be resupplied. So do you think there were any missed opportunities with this one?
Yeah, so I think they really could have made 2 games from the Empire and Rebel stories by extending them individually a bit rather than intertwining them. Although this was implemented quite well in the one single game, it was a bit of jumping back and forth between the 2, and this did make it lose its way a bit in places, I felt. They could have had a battle at the end between the 2 Empire and Rebel pilots that you play as for the missions. For the battle, you could have chose who you wanted to be, which side you wanted to be on beforehand. And this narrative of the 2 squadron pilots could have been intertwined into the story to have multiple endings to the game. More modification to the starfighters, it just didn't feel interactive enough at all.
I also found the way they did the story a little unusual, and I wasn't actually that keen on switching back and forth between the 2. I kind of wanted to be the good guys, and then you suddenly find yourself acting for the you're essentially acting for the bad guys, and I didn't necessarily like that. They did well to bring the 2 together, as Dav mentioned, but perhaps they could have just had 2 entirely separate storylines rather than trying to make them mingle together like this, because sometimes you want that choice of being like, I want to be the bad guys or I want to be the good guys. In this, it just went back and forth with really no choice as to what who you were and what you were doing. The main missed opportunity, I think, was just the fact of being able to move around the ships and the hangars freely. This is such a massive oversight and a real missed opportunity. A deeper customization of the flight models for each ship would have been nice. There was a limited amount in the options, but all still quite shallow relatively compared to an actual simulation type game.
So in terms of scores, Dale, what do you think?
So as mentioned, I did find the game just a little shallow overall, a bit too linear, even on rails at times. And it felt like it was just pushed out in a relatively basic form by the devs. It was also frustrating at times, mostly due to the resupply issues I mentioned. I did mostly enjoy it, found myself submerged in the Star Wars universe, especially with these huge battles at times, but overall it's going to be a 6 out of 10 from me.
So generally, I did enjoy the game. It's got great graphics and an authentic Star Wars feel to it. It's not a bad game, but it feels like they could have done much more with it to expand the story mode content. Poor choices of game mechanics, such as the player being locked in place, means that it lacks immersion and interaction with the environment and the NPCs, and the interaction with the starfighters could have been much more simulation-like. So on balance, it's a 6.5 out of 10 from me. Well guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, and we'll see you in the next one.